Welcome to today's episode of What to Say and How to Say It, the podcast to help you fix your marriage. I'm Shai Lewis. I am here with two special guests, Pastor Chuck and Ashley Elliott, who are here with us to discuss their latest book, I Used to Be. Chuck and Ashley are content creators who have partnered with YouVersion, Right Now Media, and an array of other national organizations. They serve as board members of the AACC's International Christian Coaching Association. They're frequent speakers and popular workshop leaders. Their numerous certifications and psychoeducational programs equip them to help others build relational success. In addition to speaking and writing, Chuck is the pastor at Bethel Church in Evansville, Indiana, and Ashley is a licensed counselor at Auxilium Psychological Services. You can find them at chuckandashley.com. Well, welcome to you both. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Shai, thanks for having us. We're looking forward to this conversation. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So your book focuses on grief, which is a really, really hard topic. I'm glad you wrote it because it's a necessary topic. I find, don't know how to talk about grief. We don't know how to walk through it. We don't know how to walk with others through it. And so I'm really excited about what you guys have to say. Tell me why you decided to write this book and what your story is.
So we went through several different things that were difficult in our lives, and this was one of the reasons why we chose to write about grief. But before we ever went through grief experiences, we had worked. I knew before I got married, like I really had a passion for working with pastors, like helping marriages, these different things. And 1 year into marriage, we started working with married couples. And so when we were talking about the books, we're like, do we write a marriage book or do we write a grief book? And we decided to just take a very relational approach to grief. And so that's part of kind of where we were in the decision-making progress whenever we were talking about writing. But our specific losses were miscarriage. I went through and we lost babies in 2015, 2016, and 2017. And so that was a tragic thing to continue like just going through over and over again. Thankfully, we had two boys. And so we had two boys. And then we faced these losses over and over again. And then to tell the spoiler, we ended up having a miracle boy after a lot of treatment and a lot of specialists, a lot of prayer, a lot of heartache. But we took a year off and we said, we just want to celebrate him. But after that year, we want to do something because we know we felt alone. We felt like we were unseen. We were struggling, and we wanted to create a resource that would help people feel better, be able to process. And so that's why we ended up, writing this book and the timing that we wrote it in.
And we saw how everything was relational because grief impacts different people in different ways. And it also comes up in a marriage. One of the things that we speak to in the book is how men and women sometimes experience grief in different ways. And my perspective of losing kiddos through miscarriage, because I'm well aware I didn't have the babies in my body, but I still lost my kiddos. And being able to process that and recognize it, even though it's different, gave us permission to think about what else is there that people could be grieving that they're not talking about. What else is there that people are grieving that it's impacting their relationships? And if they gave attention to it, then the relationships could be stronger. Something about the book is we don't write our stories and we don't go through grief just for the purpose of trying to be sad and seeing how much we can stay in that. But we're saying, okay, yes, this is real, and we're going to look at it and we're going to look right at it. But we know that as we process it and as we work through these things, we can get stronger. God can use it. A relationship can get stronger. And we're not doing this to forget about the people or things that we lost, but saying, what's it mean to continue to take steps forward in light of that situation?
And we have a few different goals in the book. So one of the goals is that people are able to pick one loss and they focus on that and work through the book and the content. And then by the end of the book, the hope is that they would be able to say, I have healed at least some from this loss, and maybe I could help someone else. And so this process of helping ourselves so we can help others is such a beautiful picture of the body of Christ. But it also requires that we have a healthy identity. And that's part of why we use the title, I Used to Be, and then we have a blank there
Yeah.
where people can kind of fill it in. If they used to be married, if they used to be employed, if they used to be a son or a daughter, whatever the loss is, whether it's a large loss or a small loss, their identity has been shaken. And we want to help them, sew these broken limbs up, reset the limb, whatever it is that we use as an analogy, but just help ourselves heal so that we can then help others heal down the road.
Oh, I love that. We hear about the cycle of grief, and it's a lot of steps from what I understand, whether you're at the denial stage or the anger stage, or you get to the acceptance stage. But the thing that you mentioned that I don't think we talk about enough is how we find our identity in that process, and how we see God through that process. Talk about how that is important, to know that God is with us and his voice is comforting when he can feel like he's nowhere around for many of us.
Whenever we lose a significant relationship or title or whatever it might be, it really shakes us and we wonder, who are we now? Because, Shai, if I were going to ask you to tell me about yourself, you might say some of the things that have to do with your relationships, your role, your job, the things you've done. And if you were to lose one of those, it would shake, who are you now? And you might wonder that. And it also helps us, or not helps us, it pushes us to question, who's God? Like,
Yeah.
wait a second, God, I thought you loved me. I thought you cared about me. Why did you take this away? Why did I lose this person if you really care? And I'm crying out to you now, and I don't feel like you're as close as I want you to be. And I can tell you that Ashley and I experienced that through some of the losses that we went through, not just the miscarriage, but some breaks in trust in our own relationship and things that we went through with friends and family. It can feel like, well, wait a second, God, where are you in this? And I feel more alone, even though I don't want to feel alone. And that's a struggle that we actually talk about. It's like, when God is silent.
And I notice for me, whenever good things happen, I often think, "Oh, God loves me."
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah.
And then whenever things start being more difficult, I'm like, "Oh, well, maybe God's taken his hand of blessing on me.
We did something
I
wrong.
did something wrong,
Yeah.
or maybe God doesn't love me." And I've really had to just challenge that view of God, that God isn't changing and I am the one that is often changing. And that's been hard for me because I did have some moments, through our losses. And the first loss, we like worshiped in the through the miscarriage in the ER, and we went home and I felt like I was okay. We took a year to grieve. And then the next year is the same season of life and same season in the year. And it just felt like we were doing a replay, and it just was so devastating. But I felt like my faith just was shaken a little bit deeper in that
Yeah.
time. It's like, Lord, I worshiped you and I tried to do all the right things to process, but
Right.
I couldn't control all of the things and create a perfect redo scenario where it was going to just work out. And one of the things that I felt like God revealed to me in one of my prayerful, upset, quiet moments was like, God is worthy before. God is worthy before I get the answered prayer. God is worthy before I was ever born. God is worthy before I get the man that I prayed for, or the man that I'm disappointed by, or any of the things, right? The good things or the bad
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
God is worthy. And in that relationship where like God's up here and I'm on my knees before him, is that position that I feel like I would go like, God, it just doesn't feel fair. It doesn't feel right. Like I would say for me, one of the things is like, I didn't even ask you to give me my baby back. I just wanted your presence. Where's your presence? Like, but I could hear myself. It's like, that's still almost a prideful state, right? It's like, I did all the things, like I'm trying to be spiritual, and where are you? And so it's like, if I do all the right things, I still think that I must deserve God's presence. And just reminding myself, I will never be worthy. It's still a blessing that God even accepts me, but my emotions, my feelings don't tell me where I actually am. Like God says he's near to the brokenhearted. Didn't feel like it at times. So I give myself permission to be mad at some of those scriptures and the way that I feel. I'm like, God, where are you? But I'm going to hold on to your word that you say you're near. So you are near.
And something that we found, for maybe for myself and I've seen in other people, is we think that God can't handle us being mad at him.
Yeah.
Like,
That's true.
he can handle it. He can handle it. You're really upset. You're mad. You're angry. You don't think it's fair. That needs to be your prayer. And the
Yeah.
beautiful thing about the book of Job is Job talks about how he is in such pain and how he's upset and how it doesn't seem right and it just
Mhm.
doesn't make sense. But you know what all those are? Those are all prayers. Those are Job going to God and talking to God about it. He's
Yeah.
not complaining to other people about God. He's talking to God about the issues that he has. And that's
Yeah.
just a beautiful picture that we can model. And I've had it out on runs, on drives, with just being by myself, sometimes just in my own head with God, and feeling like I don't know why things seem this way. But something that I noticed is that during crisis, during
Mm.
difficult times, we reap benefits of the investments that we made before that time.
Say more.
So
Yeah.
whenever we have read the Bible, whenever we have invested in relationships, whenever we have done the things to take care of ourselves spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally, when we do those things during crisis, we may not feel this flood of everything being perfect, but we have stability and have health that we may not even be recognizing during those times because of the work we did beforehand. And I don't say this to try to scare people and say, hey, there's a really hard time coming. You need to prepare. You need to prepare for it. But God's word and God's way is perfect. The model that he sets up for New Testament biblical community, the way that he tells us to engage with other people, to fully come to him, to have these relationships, to do these things, to read his word, to have the devotions in our life, they make us better for the harder times. And we don't often recognize that. And I've seen it many times where I've benefited. I've benefited from the stability and maturity that Ashley has built into her own life, and my family benefits from it. I benefit from it personally, and my three sons benefit from it. And it's not just in the moment, but it's the things that happened before.
A verse that came to my mind, as you're talking is, it says, though the rain comes in torrents, though the flood waters rise and the winds beat against that house, it will not collapse because it is built on bedrock. Like that foundation is in God. And it does take time. You're not building in the middle of the storm. You're building before the storm. And that's why it is important. But I don't want us to just keep saying, oh, just build before. Like, you might be tuning in and you're in the middle of it. And that's okay too. But one of the biggest things I'm trying to do in my own life is shorten that space from my sin or my failure to me running to God. If I can say, God, help me now, and like just call out to God, I believe that's what pleases God. It says that God calls us to be holy. To be holy doesn't mean to be perfect. I think I sometimes misread that and think, oh, I can't be holy. I can't be perfect. It's like, no, but to be holy means that we are going to be set apart and we are going to call on God. We're going to have God be our Lord. And so, Lord, help us when our identity is shaken. Me, even in this month coming up, I don't know what's going to happen, but I can bet that there's going to be a moment where I feel like I start to feel weary. I'm unsure, and that's where our identity is shaken. And if we run back to God and invite God into that, then we shorten that space and we can find healing a little bit more quickly. And so we're finding encouragement in it, but it's not always as easy as it sounds.
No, this is so rich, so good. One of the things that I picked up that you said is when you guys went through the miscarriage the first time, and how your response to him was worship. And I think that's so important to mention because that's also a benefit of going through something hard, is that it draws us closer to him and reminds us of his majesty and his magnificence and his sovereignty, whether it is the blessing or the disappointment. He's still God in the situation and worthy of that worship. And so I don't want to just skip over that because it's such a beautiful thing that I think that, when we think of grief or loss, we don't think of, oh, but I met him there. He met me there. And we had intimacy there. And so I just love that was your first response to that experience. That was really beautiful. Okay. Talk to me about some of the lies that happen when we're grieving. At Greater Impact, we often deal with couples in conflict, and a lot of this is a perception thing, things that have come from their childhood, their own traumas, their value systems, or thought processes that are just out of line with the Word of God. How do you see that showing up in grief?
We already hit on one of them, and that's the lie that God doesn't care and he doesn't see you anymore. And the lie that you did something so wrong that you have to be punished now.
Mm.
And that's one of the lies that people believe. One that we experienced is that you're alone. Like grief will lie to you and tell you that you're alone. When you
Mm.
say that about working with the couples that you do, and I think that's just such a beautiful way to think about it, that, well, wait a second, what's going on in my past? What type of lies am I believing that are not helping me in this relationship now? And whenever you tell yourself that you're alone, then you're not going to reach out for help.
Mm.
Whenever you tell yourself that nobody else has ever felt this and I have messed up my marriage worse than anybody else has, or I've done something more stupid and I've gone too far and my situation is too unique that nobody would understand and can help me. When you do that, the enemy tells you to isolate because there's nothing that you could do. And that's a lie. And that's kind of like what you see with those couples. But for
Mhm.
grief, we can tell ourselves sometimes and believe the lie that we're alone and we're supposed to be alone. And I have to clean myself up and I have to figure out how to be okay in a room culturally. When I go to church, when I go to work, I have to not make anybody else uncomfortable before I can do anything to re-engage with my friends, my people, before I can come back to them. And that you have to have it all together. And that's definitely a lie.
And we see that so many people just kind of go through this cycle. Like you go through a hard time, and so you isolate because that feels safer. And then you get really, really lonely or really depressed, and you finally like, I got to reach out to someone. And then that might be good for a little while, or it might be hard. You go, oh, then they hurt me, or they ask questions and it feels awkward or uncomfortable. And so then we get back to isolating. You're like, I'll just isolate. And so I know for me, I didn't even isolate physically all that much because I was very connected. I had a job that took me to work. I didn't quit my job. I
Mm.
had kids, so I was around kids all evening, and
Mm.
then we were active in ministry. And so what I found I did is I pulled back. I isolated socially. So when I couldn't physically isolate, I emotionally isolated. And I've actually seen that in a lot of people. So as you're listening, you think, okay, when might I socially isolate, or what does that look like? What does it look like to emotionally isolate? So for me, I would typically be a more bubbly person, just like, hey, how's your week been? I
Mhm.
would find myself going, I can't ask how their week is because I can't handle anything that they're going through. I can barely handle what I'm going through. And so I think grief lies and tells us we're alone. It tells us that we shouldn't reach out to people. We should just manage it alone, stay home, fix ourselves, and then we'll get better and then we can go back into society. And again, like you said, that God's way is perfect. Like the picture that we see in the scripture is one of community. And God wants us to be in community because that will help us survive these hard times that we go through. And if you have someone that's asking you questions, even if they ask them imperfectly,
Which they
uh,
will.
we can sort through some of the things that we feel. And we do give some tips in the book to help people to process, hey, if you're going through something and someone says this, hey, they've said hurt things to us too, but if you're reading this and you're going to support someone, try to not do this. And we provide a little bit behind it. So one of the things that we realize is people oftentimes want to be spiritual. If they're a Christian, they want
Mm.
to say, oh, they're in a better place.
Yeah.
Well, that makes that person feel spiritual, but the person who's on the receiving end actually feels like that's almost telling them, like, clean yourself up because they're in heaven. Just think about the bright side. And
Yeah.
for us, like that has been hard. And so tying it back to couples, I do think sometimes when one of us is having a hard time, we can have the other person that's like, let me just fix it, or let me just tell you, just go pray about it, or
Cheer
just
it
be
up.
better, let me just bake you some popcorn or something. And sometimes those things don't fix as much as we'd like them to, and we need to say, ah, that's really bad, I'm so sorry. And one of
Mhm.
the biggest encouragements I got from someone was at the gym. Whenever I told them I had a miscarriage, she goes, oh, that sucks. and
Yes.
and I just remember going, thank you. Like instead of saying, oh, they're in a better place, the
Mm.
thing that feels like it's supposed to be spiritual sometimes feels like a slap on the face, which then confuses our faith. If we're already like, God, where are you? Then that feels hard. And so I think normalizing, like, it's okay if you have a hard time with the spiritual comments that people say, just sort through it and go, God, why am I having a hard time with it? Like, be curious. And maybe you're having a hard time because you're like, I don't really think that's how God is. And maybe it's not how God is. Maybe you're right. Go to scripture and sort it out, but don't just isolate and don't just turn all your anger toward God, but keep filtering it out because like you said, there's so much that goes on in our mind that is this battle, that's a mental
Mhm.
game that we have to say, I'm going to fight for that positive space.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just really, like you said, validating the person in that moment, just agreeing with their feeling that will make all the difference, or just sitting with them in silence. I found that sometimes when people are going through a hard time, they don't need a lot of words. They just need your presence, and you to just kind of sit with them in that moment and say, yeah, that sucks, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, absolutely. And that sometimes we put the pressure on ourselves that we think we have to say the perfect thing to fix it. And it's
mm-hmm.
like, hey, if you're going to comfort somebody who just lost somebody or something that was really meaningful to them, you're not showing up to fix it.
Right.
Like, don't put that pressure on yourself or on them to feel like you did something that was great. Being there and recognizing. Ashley and I talk in the book several times about what does it mean to be seen. Well,
Mm-hmm.
being seen just means someone sees you where you are, but they're not judging you. They're not pointing out what you look like. Because I want to be seen, but I don't always want somebody telling me what I look like. You know,
Right.
it's like I want you to notice that I'm having a hard time, but I don't want you to tell me what my tears and my ugly face looks like right now. But those are two different things. Like, don't point out the obvious, but be with me. Be with me and be in this moment and just take a breath. Don't rush me out of it. Don't like it doesn't have to feel like you're trying to reduce the awkward or reduce the pain necessarily.
And I think when we're trying to think about what to say, we're trying to think about when to say it, we are really struggling with how do I say it right? Like
Yeah.
we're not always just totally trying to say, well, what do I say? Like, no, I have this really bad thing that I feel like I need to tell you, and I don't want to hurt your feelings, so I'll just keep it inside. Or I think it might make you feel bad. And so there's oftentimes a tension whenever we're struggling with a loss or a struggle in the marriage. We don't want to hurt the other person's
Yeah.
feelings. So sometimes even when we face that, we will face a lot of anger. And so that can be part of the grief lying to us and telling us like, okay, you're angry. You're just not very pretty right now. You just stay home until you get yourself all fixed up and then you can go deal with the anger. But what we've found is helping people lean into their feelings can really help them move from this negative space back to a positive space. But Chuck, tell a little bit about the anger wall and kind of what that looks
Mm.
like.
Yeah, many times when we feel angry about something, it's there's something underneath it and it's revealing what we care about. So, Shai, if I were to ask you what makes you angry, then you would tell me about something that violates something that you love, right?
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
if you get angry about it, so if someone lies to you, why do you get angry? Because you value honesty, you love honesty, you like openness and somebody being truthful with you. But we saw it with grief and other times in relationships that when anger comes up, what's underneath it? So if you have this wall and you have anger written on it and you pull out a brick and you look underneath the anger, what might you see? You might see insecurity, you might
Mm.
see fear, you might see grief, you
Yeah.
might see sadness,
Yeah.
you might see just loneliness. You see these things that we don't know how to deal with all the time. And it's harder for me to tell Ashley that she hurt my feelings than me just to act angry because
Yeah.
anger makes us feel more powerful. And many times when something's been violated that we care about, we feel weak, right? So if
Mhm.
someone lies to me, I feel weak because I feel deceived. That was something that they had more power over me in that moment, and I didn't like it. What do I need to do to feel more powerful? Well, anger makes me feel powerful. I show the other person that it's not okay with my anger, and maybe they won't do it again if I put enough of that out there. And you have these power plays that go on many times in relationships and within
Yep.
ourselves.
Mhm.
And anger is a quick way to feel like we're getting our power back, but it
Mhm.
masks a deeper emotion that is probably putting a wall between us and another person to have more connection.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah, one of the things we teach our clients is we call it the steps, and it basically teaches you how to have emotional control, whether it's anger or another emotion. But one of the first steps we teach is to name the emotion so that
Mm,
you can kind of get power over it and it's not overpowering you. And then of course we go through several other steps where we look at God's truth and what he has to say about the thing that we're dealing with. But I do think that's so true. Anger is, I've heard, a secondary emotion, and
mhm.
so it's really important to get underneath what's really going on there.
I like that you have people name the emotion and list it out. Through the work that we've done, sometimes I feel like my vocabulary about the emotions that I'm feeling is very narrow. Like, well, wait a
Mhm.
second. It's not just sad and happy and angry. It's like, oh, well, I'm lonely. I feel embarrassed. I feel ashamed. And I sometimes I realize, oh, there's things that are going on and I don't always name it in an appropriate way. And maybe if I did that more, I'd be able to
Mm.
communicate better. So I love that you have people do that with those steps that you were talking about, like really naming what it is. It's like, well,
Yeah,
maybe it's not, and sometimes it doesn't come quickly and people feel like
right.
it doesn't matter, but like doing that work to get underneath it is really powerful.
And helping us to realize, oh, I'm choosing angry for a reason, like helps us to know, okay, I want to choose something different. And for me, it was really helpful to remember that God made our emotions, that God even made anger. We just have to allow God to help us see what it is that the anger is revealing and how to handle it. So we don't want to sin in our anger, but especially anger is one that causes us to sin or to react in ways that we regret. So we know like there are people, some people say like there are no positive and negative emotions. I do think there are ones we want and there are ones we don't. We want to be happy. We don't
Mhm.
want to be in grief. We don't want to be angry, but giving ourselves space to say, "Oh, like I'd rather be angry than be jealous. I'd rather be angry than be embarrassed."
Mm.
And so if we're able to process what we're really feeling and bring God into that, and know God, why am I feeling this? And is this the appropriate emotion? Because sometimes God would be more pleased if we just felt embarrassed, said sorry, and moved on, or felt a little guilty and
That
said
sounds too
sorry.
hard. I don't like that.
But anger is like, no, I can have the power and I can blame you or blame someone else. And so as we sort through it and bring God into it, I do think that we find so much more healing than just trying to sweep it under the rug or lock it away in a box.
Absolutely. I want to quote you guys. You guys say we cannot control our world, but we can change our behavior. It's amazing how much our behavior positively or negatively affects everything around us, especially our perception of the world. What did you guys mean by that?
Okay. Well, one of the things that we talk about is this positive and negative space.
Hmm.
And sometimes, especially in grief, we can get stuck in this negative space where it just seems like our world feels muddy. We have a flood of negative emotions, feelings, and behaviors. And
Mm.
so whenever we try to give people a space, we use some imagery, pictures in the book, and help people to be able to process like, what does your negative space look like? And on the flip, we want to do that positive because we know like typically start off relationships in that positive space. You go on a first date and you're like, oh, I think that they're good, right? We have these positive thoughts, feelings, and behavior, but we can tend to go back and forth between this positive and negative space. And what we try to help people do in our coaching or speaking, the ministry that we do is help people gain insight to that positive thinking and the negative thinking and what that behavior, what drives the behavior. And so whenever we look at our thoughts, if I think there's no hope for us, or I'm just too depressed, I can't go to work, if we just stay there and we don't bring God into those thoughts, we'll find ourselves going, yeah, I'm not going to work. And so the behavior is going to be, I don't go to work or I don't invest in the marriage. And if we feel hopeful, then our behavior will follow suit. So whenever we go through a hard time, we're like, we can't control our circumstances, but we
Right.
can control our behavior. And so I am in grief. I do not like what I'm facing. Lord, I feel like you're silent, but I
Hmm.
am going to turn to you. Who else do I have to turn to? Lord, I'm going to stay faithful. I'm going to come to you with the way that I feel, and I'm going to do things even though I'm not quite feeling it quite as much. And so that might be, I'm going to get counseling. I'm going to join y'all's group. I'm going to be a part of things even though I don't quite feel like it, because I know that this is what God instructs us to do, to find community in some way, to bring him into it. And so sometimes we don't have the courage to bring God into it on our own. And so, like I said, we call it switch theory because people can switch back and forth between this positive and negative space. And we try to
Hmm.
help people switch back toward that positive space. But the process is building awareness first. And then we take them through a process to kind of learn about themselves and move back toward that positive space.
And we find when people stay in the negative space too long, they start building this house and even a mansion in the negative space. And whenever you're in that space too long, everything starts looking negative.
Right.
You've probably had it happen before or seen it happen
Yeah.
to plenty of other people. You start feeling negative, and then whatever happens, it goes into that negative file folder. And it's like, well,
Right.
wait a second, all these things didn't used to be bad, but you have momentum going that way. So what we try to do is help people to break those negative thinking patterns and get back to a positive space because we all want to get into a positive space, but we don't often know how to get there. So are we going to communicate about the unmet expectations? Maybe we haven't communicated about them before, and we can do that work.
Chuck, do you want me to tell an experience that I faced where I fought for the positive space this week?
How much does it involve what I did wrong?
No, you did well.
Oh, okay. Then, hey, I think this is a great time to share.
Okay. So we use the language in our house, like we're fighting for a positive space. And sometimes it's frustrating using our own stuff to help each other. More of like on my own. Yes, the kids too. They don't always love it. But we were playing racquetball. This was our first date. We played racquetball. And this is, 16 plus, 17 plus years ago. But this week we were playing racquetball and we just don't get to play very often. And I'm struggling because I'm just not quite warmed up. I'm not doing very well. And then I've had some like physical issues that just have made it harder. I've had tailbone issues. And so then I'm not supposed to run. I'm not supposed to do all these things. And it's felt very controlling to my entire life, but I'm not necessarily feeling pain in the moment. So it's not like you have a bad, elbow. And so you want to obey. It's like, I have to do this obedience. So I'm just getting grouchy because I'm in my head. I'm like, I'm not supposed to run. I'm going to run. I'm like trying to do all these things, but I am just stuck, like trying to have fun and trying to like, oh, memories, dates. And it was very hard for me. And I was just not telling him. And so one game in, like I wasn't doing very well. I end up just telling him, like, I just got a lot of stuff in my head. Like I'm processing a lot from our day earlier. And I'm also processing it's the fact that I want to just be free and be like it was when we were dating, and I'm having a hard time. And I didn't really want to talk about it because it made me feel weak. And all of that was part of the struggle anyway with this issues. And so as I talked to him, I was like, I do feel a little bit better, even though like I got a little watery eyed. I was like, don't just play the game. It helped me to talk about it. And so me talking about it helped me move back toward a positive space. And we were able to play a couple more games and I did a little bit better. I think that I was out of my head a little bit more. I felt that connection. And so fighting for a positive space is a lot of different things. So at first I was like, just play, just don't talk about it. It's fine. Just push through and like, okay, this isn't working. Let me try to share. And Chuck encouraged me. You even came over and gave me a hug, and that helped. And so as we help each other as husband and wife to share the things that we're going through, to learn our cycles, and maybe our cycle is just to try to like zip it up, don't talk about it, lock it away. Because that doesn't work. Okay, so we try to create new patterns, and so that's something that we've found success with. And again, we could tell you stories where we're not doing it so successfully either. But I'm thankful for one where I'm like, yay, it felt good to apply the theory and it worked.
Question. How did you get to the place where you were aware of yourself enough to know that you needed to communicate that? Because I think sometimes it's just half the battle, recognizing whether, you're at work or at home and you're with someone you're just, having an experience with, whether it's with yourself or with them, getting to the place where you're like, this is what's happening with me right now. I don't even think we know how to do that. Like, how did you get there?
First off, you kind of have to want to get there and do the work for it. And it is emotional work. I think that's kind of the first thing. And you recognize that I want my relationship to be better, and this could be part of it. So let me tell you about me.
Okay.
I notice that whenever I'm in a negative space and I'm having a hard time, I get quiet. So if I notice that Ashley said a couple things and I haven't felt like saying anything back, just in regular conversation in the kitchen while we're cooking dinner, something's going on, and I just feel upset and I don't feel like talking about any topic, that's probably an indication that I need to say something about what I'm feeling. But if nothing else, it just letting her know I just had a hard day and I'm feeling kind of stressed and we can probably talk about it later. Just saying that sometimes can be hard for me. And I've gotten better at it over the last several years. But what it does is it reduces the tension and it lets her know I'm not ticked off at her.
Right.
It's just like, oh, no, this is something that's going on. And it's like, yeah, something happened, but we can talk about it later. Just kind of saying what it is, that reduces the stress. And when you're just not connected, and sometimes I tell myself, if something frustrates me, all right, is this something that I need to let go? Was that my ego that was hurt? Is it enough that I need to say something about it? But if I know that I'm dwelling on it and it's not getting any better, then I need to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And I think it's little micro changes and practices. And something I've tried to do is I've tried to, and this is just for me. This could be unique, or maybe some other men if they felt something similar to this. I've tried to tell Ashley my micro frustrations during the day, to practice doing that when it's not even a very serious thing.
Yeah.
And that helps me to talk about it when it's something that it could be a more frustrating thing. So if
Yeah.
something happens during the day at work or wherever I am that I feel disrespected or I feel frustrated or I feel let down, I was like,
Mhm.
I'm not real mad about this, but this was annoying and I'm just telling you what happened with it. I've done that a few times and I feel like it's me working that muscle.
And I've appreciated it whenever he's done that. It's been helpful for me. And I just think it's so powerful whenever we do try to explore. So you're asking like, how does this happen? It
Mhm.
doesn't happen overnight for sure. But for us, as we keep trying to be curious about ourselves and communicate
Yeah.
with each other, that helps. And so we will hash out disagreements and we'll go, okay, let's look back and go, where did this go wrong? Seems
Mhm.
like I got really upset when you said this thing. Is that right? Or it seems like I know whenever you said this one thing, I felt attacked. If I'm
Mhm.
able to go back and help him understand where I feel like I escalated. So we use an escalator, say we want to both recognize when we're escalating and we try to turn it around and go back down the escalator. We also want to do that for ourselves. Like, I know I'm escalating. How do we turn things around? And so that process of building awareness just happens over time. And so we have a worksheet. We encourage people to like put it by their bedside. Like, put this by your bedside because we want you thinking about it regularly. We want you to become intimately familiar with your positive and negative space. And so you can build your house in that positive space. And so as you're processing, just the awareness will be powerful enough. Like you said, oh, I'm all of a sudden quiet again. And oh, this is the third time I've done this in the last few weeks. What's
Mhm.
going on? We start just as we become aware as a couple and as an individual, then it just walks with us.
Mhm.
And then it helps us to have the motivation to actually say
Well,
something and try something different.
and one of the things that help people go through is, like Ashley said, with that switch theory worksheet, you write down some of your negative behaviors when you're not speaking. And one of mine would be, oh, I'm just being quiet. I'm not saying anything and I'm feeling withdrawn. So when you work on the relationship and you write down the things, oh, typically if I'm in a negative space, what am I going to think and what am I going to do? Right. And if I'm in a positive space, what am I going to think? What am I going to do? And that helps you to recognize it. And many times we'll start believing lies when we're in a negative space. So,
Mhm.
wait a second, when I don't feel like talking and I feel shut down and I feel disrespected, maybe I shouldn't believe every thought that I have as complete truth.
And
That's
And
right.
that's really powerful to say, wait a second, I'm digging a hole here and I don't
Mhm.
get out of it later because it's not going to be fun for either one of us or the boys.
and
That's
And
right.
I'm impacting the home.
And just going through it and writing it down. I mean, it has been helpful even for our kids, but for us, if I feel like sometimes when I'm in my negative space, I'd be like, I just want to get out of here. I want to run away. You have this thought, and you go, when I say I want to run away, what do I mean?
Yeah.
I
A
just
hug.
want everything to be better. And I suddenly can't feel like it's getting better any way that where I turn and go, okay, but in a positive space, I will feel like I love my family. We have such a powerful family. When I write that in my own handwriting and I see both of those, go, both of those aren't true, right? I don't both want to leave and this. I'm switching back and forth between feeling like I love my family and what's going on in our family, right? And so when I can normalize it and go, no, no family is going to be perfect. No family is going to always get along. We have a couple teenagers, and so there are things that are complicated that make us feel and behave the way that we do. But if we take control of it and say, I'm going to look at it, I'm going to study my behavior, I'm going to know my behavior, and I'm going to expect more from myself, we will start to see changes in the way that we think and the way that we feel, and it is powerful. And so it's still not easy. Like, we're far from perfect, but it is helpful to get a little bit of that control back whenever we feel like we've gone through things that have been difficult in our marriage or in our life in general.
Yeah, that's so awesome. What would you say, and I want to pose this question to each of you, has been the greatest benefit after having walked through such hard things, hard seasons? On the other side of grief, what could we look forward to as we walk with the Lord through hard seasons, in your opinion? And I'll start with you, Chuck.
Hmm. I think I have an appreciation for things in a different way.
Mm,
Um, Not just because we got to have our little one who's about to turn 6 after the miscarriages. That
Mm,
is, I can look at him and I can feel grateful. But I think that as I have worked with people, many
mm,
people who have been grieving, people who have lost loved ones, lost identities, I think I look up at the sky a little bit different. I think that I slow down in the way that I breathe and the way that I think about God. And I think about how eternity is a long time and my life is not a long time.
yeah.
I think the perspective that I have on God and the way that it has shifted through this has been a gift. And just the way that Ashley talked about God is worthy before, he's worthy before everything happens. He's worthy before we get to heaven. He's worthy before all of it. He's
Yeah.
worthy before any of it, anything changes. So I would say that would be one of the things that I have grown in, and
Mm,
it's been a deepening, and it's a different pace. It's a different pace and appreciation in the way that I read the word, the way that I look at my family, the way that I speak to people.
For me, I had gone through different types of losses before the miscarriages, but whenever I went through the miscarriages, it affected my identity at a completely different level. I
yeah.
felt inadequate, like my body was rebelling against what my soul wanted, my heart wanted. And so, but that it affected my relationship with God in a different way. And so having gone through it and feeling like I survived this really hard thing with my faith intact. I have faced a couple of other things and I go, Lord, I'm not turning on you. Like I'm making it. Like I'm doing this. Like this thing. Like I'm not getting washed away by the storm. I'm holding on to the rock. And so I can
Yeah.
feel um really not confident in myself, but confident like God, I want to hold on to you and I am doing it. That makes me feel like I am strong in a sense, but like I'm strong in my faith in God in that way. But I also learned like a harder lesson that's good. As I've gone through this tailbone stuff, I started feeling some of the despair, like, God, where are you in this kind of moment? Like it was hard. It's hard to sit and do devotions. It's hard to sit and travel and go speak. It's hard to sit and write. And like, God, you don't want me to do any of these things. Why would you have me write this book and then take all of these things from me? And
Mm,
I found like I was still seeking God. I was still praying. I was still reading my Bible. And the same dang thing happened again. I'm like, God, where are you? And then I go, this means it's me. It's me. It's me. It's me. It's this process that's running. Or I don't even feel like I'm running, but I'm in this hard space and I somehow feel like God is distant. And so there's something about it that is happening. And so, but I had this moment that it clicked and I go, I've been here before and I know what to do. And
yeah.
so I clung to those same verses. There's a verse that says in Job, that God speaks in one way and in another, though man may not perceive it. And so whenever I have that other verse in Psalm that says, Lord, you're near to the brokenhearted, where are you? I go, hey, your word says that you speak in multiple ways. Help me not miss it. Help me not miss it. Lord, I know you're here. I've been here before. And so I'm going to try to do a little bit more to be a little bit more gritty than I was the last time. And that I'm not accepting it, that it means that God is distant, but that it's something in my humanity that is just struggling in that faith moment. And so again, not it's still like we're going through hard times, but it's such a beautiful thing to go, you will not regret this. If you run to God, you'll be stronger the next time you go through a hard time. And then you'll hopefully feel like you're building on these lessons that you've learned, and the tools that you've learned will help strengthen your relationships.
Amen. Both beautiful, beautiful answers. And it may not change with this last question. If you could choose one thing for our listeners to take away from this interview, what would it be? What would be your final words of encouragement? We do have a lot of women we work with who are maybe not grieving a miscarriage, but are grieving what they thought their marriage would look like, or they
Mm,
thought, who their husband would be, or maybe their identity that's attached to their marriages. How would you encourage them?
mm. You're not alone.
Mm,
There are people who love you and care about you, and God sees you right where you are. You don't have to have it all together. You don't have to be perfect before you come to God or before you come to somebody else and reach out. I'd start with that. The next thing is the work that you're doing, and it is hard work, isn't just for you. You're doing this work because you're leaving a legacy.
Mm,
You're working on this relationship. You're working on your heart because you have things that God has for you in your future that you need to be emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically ready for. And He has other people who need you, and the investment that you make, whether or not you can be available for somebody else when they're going through a hard time, whether you're available emotionally, mentally for your kiddos, for nieces and nephews, for coworkers. The work
mm,
that you're doing isn't just about you. Sometimes we see people when they're working on themselves or working in a relationship, they can have this lie they believe that they're being selfish. And
mm,
yes, it's important that you work on you, but there's other people who are going to benefit from the work that you're doing. And we likely have somebody in our own lives that we missed out on a relationship with somebody else because they didn't do the work to heal from the grief, from the loss, to work on the marriage, to work on the relationship. So, what
mm.
if we could stop that cycle with us? What if we could do something different? And it matters for people who are connected to us because there's people watching and people who need us.
And you said that there are some people who maybe feel like they're grieving with their marriage isn't what they wanted it to be.
Mhm.
Sometimes when we are in this negative space, we see differently and we feel like I tried everything. I can't see it differently. And so as we're going through even a grieving process, if you're in the middle of the marriage, acknowledging that that negative space speaks loudly, but it isn't always true with what reality is. And so if you want to leave a legacy, you got to keep trying. And sometimes we can't get out of it on our own. We just see the same things. And so in our work, we'll often do couple to couple coaching, and it will be beautiful whenever a husband is saying, well, she always says, and the wife is saying, well, he always says, and we can help them have language to say the same thing in a more positive space. And so turning a complaint into a request and helping them, you go, oh, I thought our marriage was over, but I was stuck in this negative space. And in that negative space, the enemy was breathing lies into my life, saying,
Yes.
you are grieving what your marriage used to be, and there's no hope. You better get out before it gets any worse. And God tells us, that his way is perfect. And it says he wants godly children from our union. He wants good things, and so we know it's the enemy who comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But sometimes we just can't communicate, and it's
Right.
like, is that the enemy, is that God? I don't know. But bringing it to God to say, Lord, help me see what it is so that I can get out of this negative space and get back to that positive space. But just in summary, just that negative space tells us we've tried everything, and
Mhm.
remembering when that voice comes up, I've tried everything. When we just hear that in our head, you're not trying, I've tried everything. In these cycles, you need to remember, oh, that's an indication I'm in a negative space. I need to get help, whether it's myself or, some tools that I use to get myself back to a place where I have hope for this marriage, for this grieving situation, whatever it is.
Amen. So good. So good. Go get this book. I used to be. It's a good one. Thank you so much, Chuck and Ashley. You guys have been such a pleasure to talk to, and I have enjoyed our conversation. I know our listeners are going to benefit a lot from what you guys have to share. And I pray God continues to use you guys in this space. It's very needed for the Christian home and really any home
Mm-hmm.
today.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much. We'd love to stay connected with people on social too. So our website's chuckandashley.com, chuckandashley.com, all one word. And you can find links to our social on there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So what will you do with the information you have today? We invite you also to check out our website, greaterimpactwives.org, for more information. We have a free PDF for you called 5 Tools for How to Stop Walking on Eggshells. And we also have coaching products and a course for you to take in your free time. Check out the next episode on how to manage conflict, and we will see you next time.